I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that changes the way you see the people closest to you. I sat in a cold family court waiting room on a rain-slicked Thursday morning, holding a folder that contained my entire future. Nothing felt real. But by the time the judge stepped into that courtroom that afternoon, everything I thought I knew about my family was gone. And what I found out next, most people can't even bring themselves to say out loud. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. My name is Marcus Vance. 6 months ago, I was a quiet high school history teacher living in suburban Ohio, trying to keep a roof over my head while rebuilding a life that had been shattered into pieces. My ex-wife, Juliana, had served me with emergency divorce papers out of nowhere, but she didn't just want a simple separation. She filed for full physical and legal custody of our 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, and demanded the deed to the home my grandfather built with his own 2 hands. The initial claims in her court filing were terrifying. Juliana's documents claimed I was an unfit father, alleging severe neglect, explosive anger, and financial irresponsibility. To make matters worse, she had hired Arthur Vance Pike, one of the most ruthless, high-priced family law attorneys in the state, a man known for destroying reputations and leaving non-custodial parents with nothing but supervised weekend visits. I was working on a teacher's salary, barely able to afford a modest public defender-turned-private lawyer, while Juliana seemed to have unlimited funds backing her legal crusade. I couldn't understand where the money was coming from or why she was suddenly driven by such raw malice. We had grown apart, sure, but the level of calculated cruelty in her affidavit felt like it was written about a completely different human being. When the preliminary hearing began, Juliana sat at the plaintiff's table dressed in pristine white, weeping softly whenever the magistrate looked in her direction. Her attorney handed over thick binders filled with bank statements, printouts of text messages, and glowing character references from her family. According to Vance Pike, I had secretly drained our joint savings account, emotionally abused my wife, and left our daughter in unsafe environments. Sitting next to my lawyer, my hands shook as I turned the pages of their evidentiary exhibit. Half of those bank transactions were completely foreign to me, and the text messages had been heavily edited, missing critical context that proved I was merely responding to her own aggressive outbursts. My attorney, a soft-spoken woman named Sarah Miller, leaned over and whispered, "Marcus, these financial records look ironclad on paper, but something doesn't line up. Did you ever open an offshore LLC or transfer $20,000 to a private account in Florida?" I looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. I had never held more than $5,000 in my personal checking account in my entire life. "Sarah," I whispered back, my voice cracking. "I make $52,000 a year teaching 9th graders about the Civil War. I don't even know how to set up a private account, let alone transfer that kind of money." That was the moment we realized this wasn't just a bitter divorce. It was a setup. The judge granted Juliana temporary full custody of Chloe and issued an emergency order forcing me to vacate my ancestral home within 48 hours pending a full trial. I spent that night packing 2 suitcases while my little girl stayed at her grandmother's house, completely unaware that her father was being stripped of his dignity. Standing in the driveway of the house my grandfather built, looking up at the darkened windows, I felt a hollow ache in my chest that words cannot describe. I was forced to move into a tiny, cramped studio apartment above a local laundromat, spending every spare penny I had on legal retainers and forensic document researchers. Over the next 3 months, Juliana made it nearly impossible for me to see Chloe. Every time my scheduled visitation window arrived, there was an excuse. Chloe had a mild fever, Juliana's car broke down, or Chloe supposedly threw a tantrum because she was scared to see me. I documented every single canceled visit, keeping a detailed journal of dates, times, and text transcripts. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Meanwhile, Juliana's legal team pushed for an expedited final trial to permanently finalize the custody agreement and liquidate the family home to pay off her mounting legal fees. Sarah Miller and I knew we were fighting an uphill battle. High-powered attorneys like Vance Pike don't take cases unless they are guaranteed a massive payday or an easy victory. But Sarah noticed a strange pattern in the financial discovery documents that Vance Pike had submitted to the court. While the documents showed large withdrawals coming from our joint account bearing my signature, the timestamps on the digital banking logs coincided with times I was standing in front of 30 high school students proctoring midterm exams. We decided to hire a private forensic auditor, using the last of my modest savings and a small loan from my brother. The auditor spent 2 weeks digging through the IP addresses linked to those online banking transactions. What he uncovered blew our minds. The money hadn't been transferred by me at all. The logins originated from a device inside Juliana's mother's house, using a VPN designed to mask the user's true location. More shockingly, the signatures on the loan applications for our house's second mortgage had been forged using a digital tracing program. Armed with this preliminary audit, Sarah requested an emergency evidentiary deposition with Juliana and her attorney, Vance Pike. We met in a sterile, glass-walled conference room in downtown Cleveland. Vance Pike sat at the head of the table, wearing a tailored three-piece suit, projecting supreme confidence. Juliana sat beside him, maintaining her standard demeanor of an innocent, mistreated mother. They expected us to surrender, hand over the house, and accept supervised monthly visits with Chloe. Instead of negotiating, Sarah calmly opened her briefcase and pulled out 3 thick folders. She laid the IP address logs, the forensic signature analysis, and bank security footage side by side on the mahogany table. "Mr. Vance Pike," Sarah began quietly, "before we discuss settlement terms, we need to address these exhibits. Your client submitted sworn affidavits claiming my client transferred $80,000 out of the marital estate and took out a secret line of credit. However, digital forensics prove every single transaction was initiated by your client and her mother." Vance Pike's confident smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He pulled the documents toward himself, putting on his reading glasses as he scanned the IP logs and forensic reports. Juliana's face turned bright red, and she began fidgeting with her wedding band, the one she still wore to play the victim for the court. "This is absurd," Juliana blurted out, her voice rising an octave. "Marcus gave me his passwords. He authorized those loans." But her attorney held up his hand, signaling her to be quiet immediately. Vance Pike wasn't just a high-priced lawyer. He was an officer of the court with a reputation to protect. Submitting forged evidence and false affidavits knowingly could lead to his immediate disbarment and severe criminal perjury charges. He leaned in closer to the documents, comparing the digital timestamps on the bank logs to the certified high school attendance records Sarah had provided. The timeline was indisputable. Marcus Vance was teaching history class while $80,000 was being systematically moved out of his life. "Juliana," Vance Pike said, his voice dropping to a low, icy tone as he looked over at his client. "Did you sign these loan documents yourself using your husband's digital signature?" Juliana stammered, looking around the room like a trapped animal. "Arthur, you're my lawyer. You're supposed to be defending me. He ruined my life. He deserves to lose everything." That confession, caught on the deposition tape recorder running in the middle of the table, changed everything in an instant. Vance Pike slowly removed his glasses, rubbed his temples, and let out a long sigh. The arrogance that had defined him for months completely dissolved. He turned to Sarah and said, "We need a 15-minute recess." Vance Pike led Juliana out of the conference room and into a private office down the hall. Through the frosted glass, we couldn't hear the exact words, but we could see Vance Pike gesturing angrily at the files, while Juliana broke down into hysterics, realizing her carefully constructed narrative was crumbling around her. When they returned to the conference room 10 minutes later, Vance Pike's face was pale. He sat down, looked directly at Sarah and me, and spoke with solemn formality. "My duties to my client do not extend to participating in fraud or presenting falsified evidence to the court. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing as counsel for Mrs. Vance. Furthermore, I will be notifying the court of material discrepancies in our previous filings." Juliana sat frozen in her chair, abandoned by the very legal shark she had hired to destroy me. The final court hearing 2 weeks later was swift and decisive. With Vance Pike removed and Juliana forced to represent herself, the judge reviewed the forensic evidence, the forged loan documents, and the deposition transcripts. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story, and share your thoughts in the comments. The magistrate was furious at the attempt to weaponize the legal system through deceit and perjury. The judge immediately dismissed all charges against me, ordered Juliana to pay full restitution for the stolen funds and legal fees, and granted me sole physical custody of my daughter, Chloe. I was awarded full, unencumbered ownership of my grandfather's house. Juliana was granted only supervised visitation rights, contingent on her completing court-ordered therapy and facing potential state prosecution for fraud and forgery. Walking out of that courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, holding my daughter Chloe's hand felt like waking up from a nightmare that had lasted nearly a year. Justice had finally prevailed, not through anger or retaliation, but through truth and perseverance. Thank you so much for listening to this intense journey today. Stories like this remind us how vital it is to stand strong when everything seems stacked against you. If Marcus's fight for his home and his daughter resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment with your overall thoughts, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel, Family Secrets and Revenge. Your support means the world to us, and we'll see you in the next story.